Welcome back. This is Deb from Never Too Late to Create, the show where we are going to explore our materials and get to know what they might do so they inspire us to create beautiful things and spread all of our love and joy out into the universe. So, today's episode is called All That Glitters Is Not Gold, or Let Your Love Light Shine, or You Make Me Sparkle and Shine. Watercolor paints that shine. So we're going to experiment with a few things, or kind of see what some of our options are without getting into a whole lot, because what happens if we just want to make a few cards and play around with our materials? We might not necessarily want to use up all of our good watercolor paper to do that. So things like cards. This is a Strathmore Creative card. Now this one, they are saying it's ideal for drawing, stamping, calligraphy, light washes, and collage. So that means we don't want to use a lot of water when we're painting with a card like this. And also you can even feel it, how there's a little bit of a sheen to it. So it's not going to absorb the watercolor necessarily the way you might expect it to, or the way you've become used to with the other papers. But the way I look at that, it's all just good information. You can also make your own cards. Whoa! I think I just moved my shot. These little cards are just pieces of the cardstock that you can pick up at any of your craft stores, or your local yard sale. This was a 50 sheet card, crafts, scrapbooking, stamping more, and it's called card stock. It's smooth. It's got a nice heft to it. It's a little bit better quality, well, a lot better quality than like a piece of construction paper. But you can also use that construction paper pack you might have around because you've been doing little arts and crafts or whatever. So, and they come in different sets. This is all pastel colors. This set was the more bold colors, and then just white. I have found 2 out of 3 at yard sales. So if it isn't damaged, no reason not to use it. And you can, experiment with inexpensively with how well do your paints hold up on a different color if you're not starting with white. And now this is part of the allure of the pearlescent paint set that we're going to work with today. Is you can one of the things that, according to the additive version of the iridescent medium that we're also going to play with today, it's the Winsor Newton watercolor medium, and it's called iridescent medium. And one of the, it says mix with transparent watercolor or apply over a dried wash. So we're going to try both of those things today. And it says particularly effective when mixed with transparent colors, especially over dark backgrounds. Shake well before use. So I've taken this and I have put the Winsor Newton iridescent medium into a little squeezy bottle. Now, this is a little set of 6 that I either picked up at a place like the dollar store, or I found it at one of the art suppliers, and they come in very handy. So they come sealed, and so it's like when you're working with a tube of caulk, you always cut off that end of the tip at the angle and at the however far you want to go back, depending on how much you want that product to flow. So I just came right down to where I stopped seeing the plastic seal at the end, because I don't want it to come gushing out at this point. So here's my little working tube and my refill bottle. And we will look at this because this is one of the pieces. If you see in the camera, let's try it just this way too. I don't know that you can catch as much this way. But when we go to the overhead light, which we walked away from the room and turned off one of our main light sources, so that shows you far better. See how the picture changes depending on how the light's hitting it. But it does stand up on that black, and we'll play with that a little bit more. And we can play with some of these other colors and tones. And I can make this tape go on for hours, and you'll be in pain. All right. Now, in one respect, I have, we're going to do, this is kind of like a part 2 from the, if you recognize this image, it's because it's the one that after I was showing you how I stretch papers on the Homasoap board, and I had already drawn out the shapes of the silhouettes of my little birds, and I thought I had these things arranged a bit better. Sorry. All right. So we worked on a couple birds the other day, because this one was the one we were looking at that I was just using my paper clips to hold down my paper, and I have it on a board. This is actually one of those little canvas boards, and I will show it to you on the other side. I was playing with some oil pastel on that. But as you can see, this is just a inexpensive board. Probably this one is more than likely from a place like Ocean State Job Lot, because there's no markings on the back. All right. Put this guy back on the board. Let's start again. All right. So if I take this one that I believe in that episode, I at least began to paint it if I didn't do as many layers. But now I have covered the whole thing with the pigments that we have. Now that we have one set here, and this is also a demonstration to show you what I do with these folding palettes. I will put either a piece of cardboard under them, like for instance on the Winsor Newton Cotman that we're using. I've kept it in the box, and then see, I can keep my color charts right there, and so everything hopefully gets put away together. But this way I can pick up my palette if I want to move it without accidentally bending it and having something shift a little bit more. Now, it's not foolproof, because I can tell you I will still slop the wet paint into the next trough if I'm not careful. But it's just a helpful hint for you to think about, oh, well, maybe I should, if you had an extra clipboard like we do right now, you could put that on there. Or if you just have another little board, something that gives you the ability to not have to be picking this up and things are moving around and you accidentally close it on, and then you'll have lots of colors. But all right, hopefully you could see that shine. And as is my habit, when I have a new product, I will make a color chart. So when I originally started playing with this set a while ago, I made a smaller color chart. Oh, there it is. And it's your color chart, so you can do whatever you want with it. Right now, I'm just going to turn the bigger one toward me because that's the way I have my paint laid out here. I just wanted to point out how, for me, when I swatch this out, that's important information because I can see how transparent or how opaque my paint is. I also, because we're going to experiment with the Winsor Newton iridescent medium, one of the pluses about these less expensive kits are the fact that they have a lot of the tops have little pans that you can mix into yourself. And so you can practice all of your color mixing over here. You can always pop that off and take that. If it's a big mess, go ahead and just rinse this stuff underneath the sink and clean up your palette that way, because these are non-toxic. They're, if we believe what they say as they import them, they're supposed to be non-toxic, nothing hazardous in them, and we rely on that faith. But what I've done with this, because one of the things they're recommending is that I take this iridescent medium and add it to my watercolor that I have, and I can create my own set of iridescent pigments. So the colors you see on this side are not part of the set. They are, sorry, they're part of what I just mixed with the iridescent. So for that, I'm using my set of the Winsor Newton, the Cotman, and I've set up a few of the colors here, and let's just take a look at that. Okay, so what I was doing, in this area, and I don't know that it's going to read very well on camera, but I can assure you it's very shiny here. It's it looks like a snowy day. It's very cool. And I will say that on certain pigments, the sparkle is a little stronger with this one as opposed to this one. But this little set is one of those under $10. I think it may have even been a $7.99. Now, all your professional manufacturers have some version of iridescent paint. So with Winsor Newton, you have this additive. I'm not sure how many other people carry just this. You can look that up yourself, but this is the one that I'm using. And so you don't have to go out and buy something really fancy just to, play with your making your cards and sending your positive messages out into the world. But if you find that when you're creating your masterpiece, you really think that you need the pigments to shine, you might want to spend a little bit more money and get a little bit more quality pigment. But we don't know these things. You can test it yourself. So what I'm going to do is I took my, let's see, which colors haven't I transferred here? And I also wanted to see, just because that's what we're here for. This is the $10 set that we started with originally and doing. There we go. Sometimes if you yank those things too quickly, the little tabs just crack off, and then it's a pain in the butt because it doesn't stay on as well. But as we all know, they usually tend to do that at some point. This is the color chart that I originally made for this set. And what I'm going to do now, because I know that these colors have a little bit more chalk in them. They're a little bit, because they're less expensive, they're using cheaper and cheaper materials, and that's why we can buy this for under $10. But as you can see, the colors are pretty. And so I want to see what happens if I take some of these pigments and add them with my iridescent medium. And does the opacity in these paints cancel the glitter, or can I work with it? So on this set, I can do the same that I was doing here with the more professional colors. I'm just going to move this guy right over here. So let's take the lid. All right, I'm just going to keep all of this off to the side. I think you can get the general idea. So I have not pre-wet any of these pigments, and what I am going to do is just dip one of my bigger brushes into, what color should we try? Let's try the purple. I see a lot of shading, kind of. All right, so you add a little bit of water. Those will soften up pretty darn quick. And I could also just add water to the pigments that I see here. See how quickly they'll redissolve. Now, if you do use the lid of your paint set here to mix like this, then make sure that you keep everything flat until you're ready to get going. Those colors have had a chance to soften up a little bit. I'm actually going to take a big old round. We'll use this one that we were using it the other day. Now, I find it easier if I start with the pure pigment as opposed to adding the pigment after I've put in the shiny stuff, because this way I can use the side or the edge of these little rims and add pigment without contaminating everything. And eventually you're going to see little sparkles all over your water and things. Just going to put a few drops. Yeah, it was a lot of drops. I may put in about the size of a chocolate chip. Now, I could stir it up with my brush, but then if my brush is really a good watercolor brush and it absorbs all that paint will be on my brush and I won't have anything in that little pan. So I'm going to take just a little skewer, and you can also toothpicks. I'm just going to stir this up and get these two pigments to mix. And as I'm doing this, actually, I can see the strength of the pigment is, it's taken me a little bit actually to get it to mix together. All right, but that's good enough. So this is going to be our experiment to see what happens when we use that less expensive paint. Because I'm going to make a swatch out here, and we'll see how it compares to the pigments in our kit, our $7.99, and also the ones that we have already pre-mixed with this, but we're using the Winsor Cotman, so we know that those are a better pigment. Okay, I'm dipping in my water, I'm making sure I have my paintbrushes clear, and I'm kind of blotting it with my, this might not look like a clean rag to you, but it is, it's clean. It's just, I washed them, so it's stained. I'm dipping into this newly made pigment. Yep, it looks good. So we'll let this dry. And what I can tell myself right off the bat is I can leave that heavier deposit. It might spread out as it's drying, but it's kind of already turning into some cool things right away. Let's see how this looks if we take one of our other paintings that we started and experiment with painting with metallic paint on our image instead of the paint that we were using. We can, where is, sorry. I don't know how well you can see. If I hold it at an angle, at least the overhead camera is picking up the shape of a bird, and it's more of a shadow shape. I don't know how well you can see this guy because we haven't tried to bring him out yet. What he was I was practicing to see what did these shiny guys do. That probably doesn't make much sense. Sometimes I listen back to myself and I think, well, you may have thought you knew what you were talking about, but you did not express it well. Hey, you know, you get what you pay for. So, since you're not paying for these lessons, you might get some bad information. And maybe not. The best information is, or advice, is just that you pull out your stuff and play with it often. And, you know, if you're distracted, give yourself something to doodle with. Let's take the little black card first, and let's see what happens with our cheaper. I want to see how it hangs out. So let's see, I have another bird in the background over here. So I'm not doing a painting for Audubon, so I can make my bird shape any shape I want to. Now, I would say even if you have your less expensive $10 set, if you go out and buy this iridescent medium, which if you go to your local Michael's, it will be under $10. I did just get some new from Jerry's Artorama, and it was more in the $6 range. So it's not a huge investment. It's not like you're buying a $20 item that you're like, oh, you know, it's doable. So what I like about this is, now these other birds that are on here, they already had, I had just the regular paint down on them. And this, I'm just, I can get more of that black paper to kind of read through it. So it's kind of fun to just have that transparent. And then depending on what angle you hold the card at, it will read a little bit differently. So, and it's your card. You can doodle on it as much as you want. These layers are transparent, so don't be afraid to continue to build and experiment with your color matching or mixing abilities, because, you know, if you see this is slightly red in this corner, so will I make it more purple if I add this little layer of blue? Maybe. Maybe not. You won't know until you try it. Beautiful. All right. Enough about how we go about making ourselves a new color with this medium. Let's paint more. So if I take my little color chart, and since I do already have pigment on here, maybe I want to play with these and see if I can build up these shapes a little bit more. And I am just going to make sure you can see that. Try to get rid of all this other distraction around there for you. Okay, I'm going to use this big round brush because I have such a big surface and area, and I just want to play a little bit more swooshy. So, if you only have a smaller brush, because you have just like the little tiny thing that they gave you in one of your less expensive kits. Well, let's see. I always wet my brush before I dip it into any paint. As you can see, I'm actually not even pulling that water off with my rag at this point. Some of these paints on the other side are still, or have dried, because I was experimenting with the medium yesterday. So I'm learning this as much as you are. So the color I just picked up is this one, and it looks pretty light right there. But now I've put it on this paper and see how much darker that reads. But it might be because we're also adding water. So don't forget that every time you add just water, your painting will look a little bit darker. So this is just clear water. I'm going to add a little bit of clear water right next to it. Okay. And I'm going to come over here. Now, had I taken my little eyedropper, I could have added a little bit more water to all of these and had them ready for use. I was using this tray earlier. So these actually have quite a bit of water to the point where the whole pan, these are not deep pans. They're not going to last for a million years, but I've had enough playing with it that they still look like there's a lot of pigment in them. So it depends on how thick you paint, I suppose. All right, I just filled my little squirter bottle just by squeezing it in the clean bucket. All right, and okay, I was going to say, see, I talk so long, I'm like, what do I have on my brush here? All right, I have the shiny version of our ultramarine blue. And I'm going to come in here, because right now, because when we painted this, if you remember, this was the piece of paper that I was kind of testing. I wanted to see what happens if I leave it in my bucket of water for more than 20 minutes or so. I actually left it in the bucket for 5 days, and finally we were attaching it to this board, and it did not fall apart. So it's just kind of learning your papers, and I'm sure for a lot of you, you're like, oh my gosh, I just do not care. All right, so I'm putting little eyeballs in my bird, and I'm not really drawing an eye. I'm just kind of darkening that space. So besides testing my little paints, we'll talk about some of the things you can do. See, you can use your finger if you want to. This guy has an ominous look. Maybe there's more of a beak there. I began to say how if you squint your eyes, you don't see that much difference between some of these values and the background values. So you have to make up your mind. What are you going to pull forward? Do you want to bring those birds more forward? Then maybe you want to make them darker. Don't forget, we're working with things that are transparent, and they are going to appear to be a little bit different once they dry back up, because the fact that we're putting this on the paper wet, it will darken that pigment a little bit. And all I'm doing is I'm just pulling up a couple of these pigments, and I'm not being like, oh, I can't, be free with it. Don't try to keep everything in the lines. At least on, this is that type of painting. If you were working on something where all that detail really, really matters, then you'll know it and you'll adjust. But I'm just kind of I want to play with. See, when it's first wet like this, you can't really see all the iridescence and what is glowing and what is not. So we are going to have to wait and see on some of these. But let's see. What happens if I take the yellow that I made using the Winsor Newton iridescence medium and I added it to my pigment. Right now, because I let these pans dry out completely, because one of the things I wanted to see was how well did the medium redissolve, and it does nice. So the thing is that you do need to keep working it, because you probably can't see it as well as I can, but there's kind of dry globs of the pigment itself, and then some areas where the pigment's already mixed in there nicely. And see, now I'm not doing anything too spectacular. I'm just kind of smushing some yellow around, and I'm just playing with the colors. And maybe I want my bird's feet to have more of a yellow tinge to them. So you can just suggest things. You don't have to spell everything out. See? It's more of just adding color. Now that paint I was putting on a little bit more dry, and I can already see the sparkles a little bit better. Now here is one of those clunks of paint where I did not have everything stirred up to the point of it being homogenized or whatever. I don't know why that word came to my head. Anyway, you can continue to mix the paint on your paper if that bothers you. Another thing you can do is you can wait for it to dry, and you can try to chip it off later. You can take one of your little toothpicks or barbecue skewers, and you can use this as a tool to help you pick up something. Like right here, I've got kind of some kind of goo-goo. Oh, and while we're here with our little stick, another thing that you can do to add detail is you can, actually this stick has some pigment on it because I didn't, well, if you're sticking a piece of wood into the moisture, it's going to absorb something anyway, so you kind of end up making yourself your own little paint stick. So if I wanted to add some grass, so play with your things. That sounds horrible. All right. Just because I want to see, let's see what happens if we put this orange over our blue, because this is, I'm adding the complement. So let's see, will it push our big blue wall back? So these are the kind of things that I'm encouraging you to just play with, because you could take a pretty simple shape and turn it into something, you know, amazing. coming back over to the Winsor Newton. Now, I was using the orange that is from this pot. And now I am grabbing the more red orange off of. So I'm going to have two different sparkles. But I also want to kind of play with that and say, well, do the two blend together? What happens if I... So, in order to get something like that, all you're doing is you're starting with a wet pigment and you're bringing up another wet pigment to join it. And then once they hit each other, they'll start blending. And that's also another thing just to look at, to see, you know, how well do these play with others. So I still have that orange on my, I haven't dipped in there again yet. This is where I dipped the last time, which actually that is not the orange. That is the Cad Red. I'm just referring to it as a, sorry, an orange because it's very close to a Vermilion orange. So if you see this Cad Red hue, I can pull out colors that will read as a Vermilion orange instead of this Cad Red hue. But you know, I could even give myself the versions on my color chart. Here's what it looks like when you add sparkle. Now the thing is that'll add a little pizzazz to that little card that you are sending off to your friends. And if you're starting to paint for the Louvre or something, you might want to check the requirements because certain mediums are not always allowed in certain shows. But that doesn't mean you can't have fun and play with them. All right, I want to try the red. Because before I was using the pink version, and now I'm going to go to this a little bit stronger. It's my Winsor Newton let's put it near that pinker. So see that's going to read a lot more strong. So some of these areas, all I'm doing is I'm taking the sister pigment and adding it to it. See, I could come in here. I'm letting them get together there and encouraging them to play around, move a bit. You're not painting a wall, remember that. And you're playing with color. Now some people will say, but I'm colorblind, I can't see anything, and you can still see values, so it doesn't mean that you can't play with painting but if it doesn't appeal to you, it doesn't appeal. I say try it and then decide if you like it or not. All right, I'm gonna pull a little bit more of, let's see. Now, again, these are the reasons that I'm like, well, what's the difference between this blue as opposed to this blue as opposed to this blue? And even when you have them swatched out, like these two guys look pretty close. So I will pull up a little bit more and see What happens if we add another layer and darken it? Oops. Sorry, birdie. I just will play with that too. I don't, as you can see, I don't get too excited about things like that. I just rinsed out my brush, and it's all just water on here right now. So I'm just pulling that paint away. Even when I'm just doing these doodles, I'll start looking around let's see what color I want to add. I like playing with the rainbows. Let me see. All right, so here I've used the yellow in this pan enough that I am starting to see the plastic of the container of the palette. But now I have my Winsor Newton iridescent medium, and I can always refill my pan that way too. Oh, and I was starting to tell you that a lot of the companies have their own more professional versions of a lot of iridescents or pigments that do kind of special things. And so if you really do think, oh, I love to have these shiny things in my paintings, you can look into them. And this is a color chart made off of Daniel Smith has a paint chip card. And what it is, they give you little dips of each of the different pigments. And so this is a fun way for you to be able to rather inexpensively look at the series of colors that a particular manufacturer carries. Now this is just for these cards, and you can get they call it a dot card. You can get that from any of the good online supply companies. Anyone who's carrying Daniel Smith, they might even have this at the local Michaels or so, because they do carry Daniel Smith products. And if you can't find it, you'll find it online, of course. So what I wanted to point out to you, if you look at they have a duochrome, they have a pearlescent shimmer, much like the iridescent medium, but this is coming as in a paint tube. It's not a additive. Then they also have a series of interferon, and those are the colors that when you tip them, they might look like right now. This one looks peach, but it kind of turns to a green, and they're calling it copper interference. And then there's a blue. I didn't have that chip card ready. So I'm just going to finish off a few more areas on this, and we'll set this to the side and let it dry. Because some of the areas we can see what the paint looks like when it goes directly onto the white paper, and other areas are showing us what it will look like if we're using some of these iridescents over an actual pigment. So I picked up the one that a lot of people would refer to as antique gold or gold. I'm working so wet that I am intentionally trying to get these guys to blend together. But it's all kind of just, I call them doodles. I'm just seeing what will this paint do. And if you're just giving yourself something to smush the paint around with a little bit, and it allows you to experiment with Like this is the pan that looks like it's pretty black, but it actually turns into more of a gray. That's why I will take something, because at this point we're not treating anything too precious. So I'll take a board like this, and I was just running all the colors. So this is actually kind of a color chart to me, because I can always come back here and go, oh, well, what was that? Because look how that popped that when it was up on top of this area. And there again, it shines and it gets dull, kind of disappears. So let's see what happens if we take these shinier paints. Like I said, we'll let that dry to the side.